Hello. I'm going to talk a little bit about mindfulness meditation and expectations. And what made me think of this is last night I was at a dinner party with a dear friend of mine who is new to meditation. She's very excited about it. She's done a lot of reading, and she wants to know about enlightenment, and she's been doing a lot of reading specifically about the jhanic states of enlightenment and how you progress from one state to the next and what the rules are and what the goals of each are. And then she asked me a couple of questions, and I had to say to her, I don't really know what you're talking about. And she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I do know what you're talking about. I've run into those subjects in some of the reading that I've done, but it's not something that I've done a lot of reading on my own, in that vein. And she said, well, why not? And I said, because it doesn't interest me. And she looked at me like I was crazy, which is not the first time that's happened. And it made me think about this notion of why do we do this, right? Why do we do this? Why do we get involved in meditation? And that reminded me of this comic strip, Calvin and Hobbes, specifically this comic strip of Calvin and Hobbes, where, quickly, in the first frame, Calvin says, I'm going to paste Susie's pate with a slush ball. First of all, kudos to Calvin for using the word pate. And in the next frame, Hobbes says, the tiger says, some philosophers say that true happiness comes from living a life of virtue. At which point, something extraordinary happens. Calvin stops, and he sets aside the snowball. And then he goes on to do a variety of things. He cleans his room, he does his homework, he is nice to his mom, he does chores for his dad, he eats his vegetables, he takes out the trash, and then when all is said and done, he stops, and this is the other pivotal moment in this comic strip, he stops and he assesses how he feels. And he decides that, no, this is not enough. And he gets pissed off, and he runs outside, and he picks up the snowball, and he throws it at Susie, and he's laughing hysterically. And in the final frame, he says, someday I'll write my own philosophy book. And Hobbes says, virtue needs some cheaper thrills. So, what I love the most about this strip are these two frames in the upper right-hand corner. These two. Wow. And if you're new to meditation, those two frames might look really familiar. You know, it's that moment where Calvin has the snowball in his hand. You know, this is his tool. This is what he always uses. This is what he always does. He throws the snowball at Susie. And he chooses to set it aside, which is a beautiful moment. It's actually very courageous. I mean, what we do when we choose to try this practice, it's actually a very courageous moment. It's letting go of that thing that we always do and trying something different. And what it reminds me of is Coleridge's phrase, the willing suspension of disbelief, or poetic faith, he also called it, which I think is beautiful. That belief that maybe something else can happen. And what is so fabulous about that moment is that the quality of that moment is one of great spaciousness. It's very open-ended. It's very spacious. And it's there's a curiosity to it, a playfulness to it. Well, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. I'm going to give up the snowball. I'm going to do this other thing, and let's see what happens. So it's very just open-ended, right? Very open-ended and exciting. And he does all of these things, Calvin does all of these things, and then that moment comes where he assesses how he feels. And it's not enough. He does not feel the way he thinks he's supposed to feel. After having done all these good things, he's like, I should feel better than this. And he gets pissed off and he cuts out. Which is hilarious to me, really, because I spend a certain amount of time myself in that frame of mind of, this isn't enough. But that moment is in direct opposition to the moment where we give up the snowball. This moment of assessing how I feel and finding it wanting is very closed and very limiting. You know, there's only one way, there's one goal, and this is what it has to look like. And if it doesn't look like that, then I'm out. It's actually one of the classic hindrances to meditation, which is craving, wanting. I want a specific outcome. If I don't get that specific outcome, then forget it. You know, it's one of those things that can bring us to the point where we throw up our hands and say, this is stupid, forget it, doesn't work, you know. But the nature, the quality of that moment is antithetical to that moment where we give up the snowball. It's in direct opposition. So in practice, what I do in my practice is I keep coming back. I come back to that moment where I'm willing to give up the snowball again and again. You know, I come back to my breath, and I come back to that sense of, I'm just going to do this and see what happens. Just going to do this and see what happens. I have a friend who used to say to me as a piece of advice, he would say, don't leave before the miracle happens. And I frequently want to leave before the miracle happens. I do. I want to, you know, cut out and do what Calvin did in this comic strip. But really the beauty and the excitement, that playful quality of, wow, I really don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to give this a whirl, is an integral part of mindfulness meditation. And so I just keep coming back to that again and again and again to see if maybe something else, something I couldn't have even imagined, might happen.